In this video, we'll see how to create a stored procedure to insert a record into a table and to modify that stored procedure to be able to accept the values to insert into the table as parameters to the procedure. All right, well, we have the context for this example is going to be our small family consulting or family counseling practice. And we will be using, we've got some data here already. So let's just go ahead and take a look at a few of our clients. So here's 6 clients that we have record of. And let's take a look at some of the appointments that we currently have scheduled. So of these first 6 clients, we only have 2 with appointments scheduled. So let's just review the process of inserting a new appointment. So I'll use the insert into statement, insert into appointment. I'll provide the columns that I want to insert the values into, specify the keyword values, and then supply the values that I want to go into those columns. This is mostly pretty straightforward. We have the counselor that we're inserting this record for is going to be James Sawyer, who'll be the one who's providing counseling. Client number 100, so this appointment is going to be for Josephine Lee up here, client number 100. It'll be in room number 2, and the start time is probably the most complicated part here because the start time has both a date and a time built into it. And so to be able to specify that, we use the toDate function. We specify a string that indicates the date and the time, and then a string that indicates how that mask should be, or how that date and time should be interpreted. So 4 digits are the year, then the month, day, and so forth. And then finally we have the duration for the appointment. And so we'll insert that record, and that inserts just fine. Now, let's create a stored procedure to do that insert for us. So we'll begin with the keyword create, and we're not going to create a table or a view. We're creating a procedure, so we'll say create procedure, and we'll give it a name. So the name of this procedure will be add appointment. And this would work just fine as long as there's not already an add appointment procedure created. So we can use the optional or replace clause. That will allow us to create it if it's not there, replace it if it already exists. All right. So then we just say as. So create this procedure as, and we'll start a begin block. So now we'll go ahead and bring in that whole insert statement. So we're creating a procedure that's just going to do this insert. Now I've hard-coded an appointment for a different client, different time, and so forth. This is just to get us started to see how the insert statement can work in a simple stored procedure. We'll end the stored procedure and execute it with a slash. Tells us the procedure is created. To execute the stored procedure, now to actually make that insert happen, I'll use the exec statement and add an appointment. I'll call the procedure the add appointment stored procedure. That tells me that it executed just fine. And now I'll go ahead and select back those appointment records and take a look. So all the appointments for clients 100 to 105. Now we can see that both of those records that we inserted, the one that we did by hand for James Sawyer and the one that the stored procedure did for Leslie Wright, have been added into our table. So now what I'd like to do is modify that stored procedure so that instead of having it be hard-coded to accept a particular set of values, that I can pass the set of values that I would like to insert into the procedure. And so we'll just go ahead and create or modify, or create or replace that existing procedure. Now what's going to be different here is that we are going to have parameters, and so we're going to put an opening parenthesis here, which will allow us to specify the parameters that will receive arguments that the caller will be sending. And so I'll create the first one as P_counselor, and I just like to preface my parameters with a P and an underscore, so I can, looking at the code, I can see, oh, that's a parameter that was passed in. Then I will specify the data type, almost as if I'm creating a record in a table or creating a column for a table. The difference is, once I've said it's varchar, I don't need to know the other dimensions of it. I don't have to put how many characters are required. Same thing for the number data type. I just give the type without specifying the details. I'll go ahead and so that'll be a parameter that will allow me to receive the value for the counselor that I'm going to insert into the table. And we'll bring in one for the client ID, the room number. Now here, instead of having the appointment date and the appointment time all bound up into the start time variable as a single value, instead I'm going to bring in an appointment date as a string, so as a variable length character string. And I will do the same thing for the appointment time. So now instead of getting my start time as one compound value, I'm going to accept them as two separate values. And I'll bring in a parameter for the duration as well. I will then close off my parentheses and establish the beginning of the procedure with the keyword as. Now here I would like to bring in a variable. So I'm going to define a variable to actually hold the start time. So in a separate step from the insert, I'm going to bring the string of the appointment time, the appointment date, and the string of the appointment time together and convert that into a date. And so this variable vStartTime I will want to be of the date type. And I'm ready to begin the heavy lifting of the procedure. I'll begin by giving the start time variable a value. And so we'll say start time gets assigned to : and then we'll just do something similar to what we did to when we inserted the record before. So we'll use the toDate function to look at a string and give it a mask to tell Oracle how to convert it to a date. And so I will say toDate, and I will bring in the date parameter. So whatever value has gotten passed in to the appointment date, I will bring that as the first part of my string. And then I will concatenate on whatever value was passed in for the appointment time. So I've got these two variable length character string parameters that I am now going to concatenate into a single parameter. And I will provide then the mask to tell Oracle how to interpret that string and convert it to a date. And so now when this line executes, I will have a date value that has the composite of both the start date and the start time for when that appointment is supposed to begin. Now I can move on to the insert statement. So insert into appointment, specify the columns that I want to do, say that I'm bringing in my values. And now instead of having the values coded as string or numeric literals, I will use my various parameters or variables as required. So for the counselor, inserting into the counselor field, I'll use my counselor parameter. For the client ID, I'll bring in my client ID parameter, and for the room as well. And now for the start time, you'll remember that I brought in a separate appointment date and appointment time, which I have then used to create a start time variable. So here I'm going to bring in the variable for the start time and the parameter that I need for my duration. I'll close off the values clause, and that's really all I need for this procedure, so I'll go ahead and end the procedure and execute it. So this now this has created my add appointment procedure. I'll go ahead and execute it. Before when we executed it, there were no parameters, and so all we had to do was supply the name. Now we'll supply the name and we'll supply literals for the values that we want to send to those parameters to be inserted. And so I'll send a counselor, Daryl Cooper, client number 102. Appointment's going to be in room number 2. Now I'm specifying the date as a separate string literal in the format that I know the procedure is going to expect. Same thing for the time. So this will be for June 1st at 11 a.m. And I'll specify the duration and close off the list of values. I should be able to execute this now just by pressing enter. We'll see the procedure was successfully executed. And let's go ahead and just take a look at that record got entered. So we'll select those values out, and we can see right here that our record for Daryl Cooper was entered in. And so that's what it takes to be able to create a stored procedure that accepts parameters to be able to insert values into a table.